So the rest of these to-do notes are fairly trivial. I have already made the level larger, so I'm just going to remove that. But we want to make the camera follow the player, and we want to provide the render method with a camera instead of using the member. So let's start with that one, because that's a trivial change. We go to our core loop. In render here, we want to provide the camera instead of it using the member internally. The reason for that, of course, is because we want to be able to move render off to a separate thread, or into a separate class or whatever. So providing those arguments makes good sense. Going down to the implementation, I want this to get a final viewport. And instead of using the member down here, we instead use our argument. Let's see, so we have render. We use the camera, we unlock in a finally, that's all good. I saw that my little nanos to second constant was back here, so I'm going to bring that up to where the other constants are. Then let's see, we have the pool. We wanted to provide the camera, and lastly we want the camera to follow the player. Okay, let's do... I think I've made a mistake, to be honest. The pool, we are organizing our memory based on levels. So what I should have done is let the level manager create a pool, or let the level manager manage the pool as well. Because each level will have its own pool. Maybe they reuse the same instance. But in this case, I'm going to pass the pool into the level manager and take that as an argument. Bitmap pool. Pool. Let's bring that class in. Let's make it final. Let's make a member. Let's save the member. Set the member rather, before we load any map assets. And this I do simply so that my cleanup can do what it should do. So after we've destroyed all the entities, set the player to null, empty the pool. This is a half measure. I realize this is messy, because now we're setting it up in the game class, we're emptying it in the level manager. I want to make sure that my cleanup actually does the cleanup between levels, and so this becomes a necessity, but you should probably move the construction of the pool into the level manager and then somehow make it available to the entities anyway. But we want to make sure our player is passed to our camera, so, or rather that it's looking at it. In my level manager, my player is set once I load something that equals player. If player is not null, set... That's wrong. If player is null, we should set the player, so that's a clear bug. Set the player to that instance, and then we return that. Okay, fine. So we have a reference to player as a member, and we have a reference to the player saved in the entity lists as per usual. That might be confusing, because if we ever try to remove the entity, whatever, who cares? Let's start with this, let's get it done. So we have level. Instead of looking at the center of the level, we can do level look at player, because there's an override taking an entity. Let's build and see how that works. I realize now there might be issues. There's a beginning of a crash. I've never seen that message before. Okay, cannot access invalid or freed bitmap. Yes. Okay, so that's a bitmap issue. That means that there's an issue with our pool. And I realize immediately what's going on, because my player is still using an unexisting bitmap. My player is currently dependent on the null sprite. In my level manager, when we start loading a map asset, I call cleanup. Cleanup now empties the pool. That includes emptying the null sprite. The null sprite, because we call create bitmap, is put into our bitmap hash map, our dictionary. So when you call empty in the cleanup of level manager, we go through each of the values in our hash map and recycle them, and then we clear the hash map. So that means our null sprite no longer exists. What that means in turn is that I cannot reuse the bitmap pool instance the way I'm doing at the moment. I really like reusing instances, so I'm not sure what a good solution is. We could perhaps filter the empty method so that we do not remove ever the null sprite. But does anyone ever ask for a null sprite? No, it's only returned when loading fails, and it's always returned from a member up here. So we could probably do something like, let's see, bitmaps is an entry set. We have a value, that's the bitmap. So if entry get value is not equal to the null sprite, of course, this means our null sprite will never be reclaimed for the life cycle of basically the bitmap pool, right? We cannot rely on empty to get that piece of memory back. So this is at best a hack. And we should probably clean up the design of our pool instead. But I think at this point we should not crash for that bitmap being gone. Again, players relying on the null sprite. Because the level manager always cleans the pool before loading another level, that sprite is gone. And so the player breaks when trying to render. Let's restart and see if this helps. So here we go. That works. That's good. Okay, so one ugly little bug kind of fixed, but not elegantly so. Let's change this back to sprite name. There are a few other things I'm worried about. So if I go to the game class at the top in the constructor here, I am creating a pool. Then I'm adding myself as a listener to the holder. And then I'm asking the holder to do some work. And then at some point later, the holder will reply to me saying that, hey, we've fixed your surface. Now you can start your game. Imagine that these things take no time. Imagine that this is a linear progression of calls. So the pool, set up the callback, do a thing, and then maybe that thing happens before our level is created. What happens then is, if you go down to that callback, we come to surface changed, the surface is ready, we start the thread. The game thread, of course, runs our core loop, which will call update, which will call render, and we will be using, here's update, we'll use the camera, we'll use the player object inside of the level manager, but it might not have been initialized yet. This is probably unlikely, because this will take a few milliseconds, and this statement will happen super fast, but we should be correct. So let's make sure we don't even try to start the loop until everything is in place. So first create the pool, give it to the level manager, yada yada yada. Am I calling pool empty in? Yes, I am. The level manager already has a destroy, so that should empty the pool in my case. Let me do this. I'm just gonna add here that it's safe but redundant. The level manager destroys it, empties too. Should empty the bitmap pool. Yeah, both of these comments are unnecessary if we make sure the pool is created where it should be created, which seems to not be in the game class. For now, I'm just going to live with that little confusion. And let me see what my comments up here. Oh, they're gone. Okay. So what I wanted to do was make sure the viewport, the camera follows the player and that we don't crash. So let's see if we're actually following the player. We are. It's a bit janky because we're following exactly the player. And the way you get around that is that instead of setting look at to the current position, you want to set look at to a percentage of the distance between the current camera and the player position. So you can ease from wherever the camera is to where the player is, instead of setting it exactly. And that way you will get a neat little animation on the camera. Look up easing or lerp or slurp, and you will find that's linear interpolation, and you will find some good references for how to implement it. Let me try one last thing here before I hang up. I'm doing 16 meters in my viewport at the moment. Let's do 3 instead. Make the world very intimate on the screen. Oh no, why did I do that? Here we go. Yeah, sweet. So that camera seems to work. It obviously needs some bounce, so I can't see outside of here. That's a bit sloppy, but you can implement that as part of the assignment. All right. Good luck with your work, and if you have any questions, grab me in the forums and we'll sort it out.